okay? Settling and floating are our next example, of a process, okay? In liquids, some materials float and some materials sink. That you should know by now. Some things float in water, some do not. Settling and floating uses that fact. It uses the fact that some things float and some things sink. When something floats in a mixture, we can skim it off the surface with a spoon, or we can pour it off the top layer. When materials sink, we can pour off the rest of the mixture and leave behind the materials that sank to the bottom. I moved on. All right. So that's what the slide says. Let me explain what it means. Let's say we have a mixture of sand and sawdust. Okay, sawdust is the wood chips that come off when you're cutting wood or whatever. And now, for some reason, you want your sand and you want your sawdust, but you need them separate. Okay, so what you do is you use the settling and floating method. So you get all your sand and sawdust mixed together, and you put it in a container, and you fill that container with water. And what will happen is sand does not float. It's too heavy, or it's too dense, so it sinks to the bottom. Sawdust does float, so it rises to the top. So what we do is we skim off the top. We remove the stuff off the top. Boom, there's our sawdust. And we pour the water out. And then right at the bottom, there's our sand. We dump it out. We got our sand and our sawdust separate. That's skimming and settling. We let the sand settle to the bottom and we let the sawdust come to the top. It floats and the sand sinks. That's settling and floating. We use it when we have a mixture of substances where one would float or one would sink and the other would not. So we pour in a liquid, and what happens is they separate out and we remove them that way. So when do we use it? When the mixture has one thing that floats and another thing that doesn't, we can remove the thing that floats, or we can let the thing that doesn't settle to the bottom. Okay, you should be able to explain how it works. Another example is if you're making a stew, or your parents are making a stew, what often happens is if it's got a lot of fatty meat in it, that fat dissolves, or it becomes liquid actually when it's heated, and then it forms a thick, gross layer of fat on the top of your stew. And people don't want that, because when they're eating, it coats their mouths and it's a funny feeling. So what you should do is you let the soup stop boiling and the fat comes to the top, and then you take a spoon and you just skim the top of the stew off to remove that fat, and you throw it away, or you use the fat for another process in the kitchen. All right, so that's settling and floating. That's process number 3. Process number 4. Process number 4 is dissolving and evaporating. This one, it's a little tricky, okay? This one's the one we use in solutions. So if you have a substance that can dissolve in water, you can pour water in to dissolve the substance. So let's say we have a mixture of, let's say, sand and salt. I keep using sand, but let's say we have sand and salt mixed together, but we want our salt, okay? But we don't want our sand. But they're mixed together. We can't filter them out because the grains are the same size. We can't sort by hand because that would take forever. It's too difficult. We can't settle or float because both of them would sink and the salt would dissolve. But there we have a trick. Salt dissolves, sand does not. So what we do is we pour the water into the mixture. We mix it up so that the salt dissolves and the sand does not. And then what we do is we take that water, we pour the water and the salt mixture out, so the salty water out, we leave the sand behind. So now we've separated. We've got salt in the salty water and sand on the other side. So we can get rid of the sand. We don't want that. But now the issue is the salt is dissolved in that water. So what do? Well, we take that water, we pour it into a container that can be heated up, we put it over a heat source, and we boil that water, and boil and boil and boil. And what happens is the water evaporates off, turns to steam and disappears, but the salt doesn't. And once we've evaporated all the water off, what's left behind is just salt. So that's what we do. We pour water in, we dissolve the substance, we pour the water out, we boil the water until the water evaporates, and what's left behind is the substance. So let's read what the slide says. Once you have dissolved the substance, you can pour out the water with the dissolved substance in it. This will not work if both substances in the mixture can be dissolved. It only works if one substance can be dissolved in the mixture. Once you have the water with the dissolved substance in it, you can boil the solution. The water evaporates and leaves the substance behind. All right. So dissolving and evaporating is the trickier one. So if you're a bit stuck, maybe jump back a bit and check this again. But you should be able to describe what happens in this process and when we use it, okay? If you have any questions about this one, please email me. I do know it's a slightly trickier one. All right. Number 5, magnetism. Okay, or using magnets when separating mixtures. Okay, so magnets attract some metals, and it does not attract other materials. So magnets can be used to pull metal materials out of a mixture, such as in the scrapyard. This is one of the easier ones. Let's say you have a mixture with a whole lot of iron nails in it, and a whole lot of sand, and a whole lot of water, and a whole lot of sticks, let's say. So you can't really pick it apart. The nails are too small. They get stuck with the sticks. You can't filter it out because the sand and the salt stay together and the twigs and the nails stay together. So our other option is using magnetism. And that's just taking a magnet, sticking it in your mixture, moving it around, and then picking out the steel pieces that will stick to your magnet. So this is just used to separate, used when we have a mixture where one of the substances is magnetic, and we can use it to separate out. Okay, that's everything for now. I know it's just, yeah. Thank you.